All right, on page 313 at the bottom of the page, there's professional aspects of good assessments. Assessing student learning is an activity that influences and affects many people. So the professional and ethical aspects of assessment must be considered. So if we look at the principles for high quality assessments on page 314, you're going to see that the base assessments on standards for learning, you base them on the learning outcomes. Exactly what you want your students to learn, represent performance of understanding in authentic ways, in real life type ways, embed assessments in curriculum and instruction, provide multiple forms of evidence about student learning, so you can't just do, let's say, one worksheet on, let's say, subject-verb agreement, and then mark that off the list as they have it. There has to be numerous. Evaluate standards without unnecessary standardization, and that's going to be a difficult one, and involve local educators in designing and scoring assessments, and that way outside people get a view. It's not just from your perspective. Make sure it makes sense. So the accommodation section of that, remember that special needs and learning disability students get some accommodation, and so do ELL learners. So the purpose of an accommodation is to allow the students access to the test content without changing the accuracy of the test, so that results are comparable to students who did not need accommodations. So it used to be that the ELL students, I'm not sure this is still happening, but they could get read alouds in math because of the ELL issue, the language barrier. But the funny thing is they could not have read alouds for reading, and I understand why, because that kind of omits the accuracy of that scoring if I read it to you. But at the same time, if I'm an English language learner, that means I'm struggling with the new, not using my native language. So determining the accommodation depends on a number of factors, including the student's disability, the age, the nature of the assessment, and the skill or subject being assessed. Often simply changing the way in which learning is assessed can provide significant new opportunities for these students to demonstrate their knowledge and skills against a set of standards. Because if you're already being tested on a batch of material, it may be that you know it, you just can't get past whatever your learning disability is or whatever the language barrier is. You can't get past enough to understand the fine. I've had a student who spoke another language, and that was her native language, and then when she's writing her papers, she struggles because the English, just like her English is very choppy speaking, she writes the same way. So she's struggling on how to make that bridge. Well, when if she was a student taking the writing assessment for TCAPS, there would be issues because they would probably look at that as not being a good paper. She's got the ideas down, and she knows the stuff. It's just making that flow, because the English language is not her native language. So those accommodations can be made for students. Your special ed teacher will determine what kind of accommodations can happen. So keep that in mind.